Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm John Favreau.
I'm Dan Pfeiffer.
On today's pod, we'll talk about President Trump's Oval Office address, about what the World Health Organization has now declared a global pandemic, how his administration is handling the response, and what Democrats can do about it. A few other notes from us. You may have seen that because of coronavirus, we are canceling the upcoming Pod Save America and Lovett or Leave It March tour dates in San Diego, Phoenix, and Seattle. We are hoping to reschedule once we can ensure everyone's health and safety. Full refunds will be available at the point of purchase, and ticket holders will receive an email on Wednesday with more instructions. We are very bummed out, but everyone's health comes first, and we can't be holding gatherings. Actually, when we decided to cancel it, we just did it voluntarily, but the state of California has now said no gatherings over 250 people, so there you go. On the plus side, we will be doing our group thread for Sunday's Democratic debate between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. We'll all be doing it from home. So join us at crooked.com/group thread starting at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. So that's great. All right, let's get to the news. Donald Trump delivered a primetime Oval Office address about the threat of coronavirus on Wednesday night, where he made a number of policy announcements. Three of which had to be corrected immediately after the speech. Trump said that he was issuing a 30-day ban on all travel from Europe to the U.S., but the Department of Homeland Security quickly clarified that the ban doesn't apply to U.S. citizens, the immediate family of U.S. citizens, or permanent U.S. residents. Trump then said that the travel ban would apply to trade and cargo. The White House later said that was wrong. Trump said that health insurers have agreed to waive all co-payments for coronavirus treatments. The insurance industry later said that was only for testing. On the day the Dow Jones hit bear market territory for the first time since the 2008 financial crisis, Trump also called for the Small Business Administration to provide stopgap loans to affected businesses, delayed the April 15th tax deadline for most Americans, and urged Congress to pass a payroll tax cut. So, Dan, what'd you think of the speech? Would you like to start with your grade for style or substance?
Look, I want to be fair here because we want to be an honest broker in the situation, but on a rhetorical level, a political level, an economic level, on a substantive level, it was an absolute fucking disaster.
Yeah.
It is, without a doubt, the worst nationally televised address that any American president has ever given. It had the opposite effect of everything he possibly could have intended, because he and his administration and his White House team are too fucking stupid to do the basics of their jobs. That he stated the policy wrong, which then led to mass gatherings at airports during a pandemic in Europe. I mean, we wake up the next morning and the market has to stop trading because it crashed so quickly because the president inspired so little confidence in in himself and his administration. It was a disaster. He really just honestly needs to shut the fuck up and stop talking.
I mean, we obviously don't agree with much. We obviously don't agree with Trump on much. We have different politics than him. But just from a basic nuts and bolts level of how to put together a speech like that and roll out policy announcements, the fact that he issued these 3 policy announcements that were wrong, that they had to be clarified immediately after, it really does show that, in case you just thought it was dumb Donald Trump and he had just sort of incompetent people working around him. No, he has really fucking stupid people working around him. The idea that an Oval Office primetime address would not get, forget about even fact check, him lying about, the best economy ever, all this bullshit. Basic policy pronouncements. Where was the policy staff? Why didn't the Department of Homeland Security see the speech in advance? Stephen Miller, Jared Kushner were working on the speech. What the fuck were they doing, letting a speech go out with policy announcements that weren't checked? And again, it's not like Trump is sitting there proposing his big plan for the economy. It's a fucking global pandemic, an urgent health crisis. The speech finishes. I get a call from a friend of mine whose son is in Paris, and he and his wife are panicking because they don't think they can get their son home from Paris because he just said no flights from Europe. And I had to then wait and find that the DHS clarified it, and then they calmed down. But you're seeing pictures today at Charles de Gaulle Airport in Paris, and it's mayhem and panic because a bunch of people are trying to buy $3,000 tickets home because they didn't know that it didn't apply to American citizens. I mean, that's just one small, tiny piece of how badly he has fucked this up. It is
He did not have to
unbelievable.
give that speech last night. He did not have to. He could have given it tomorrow night. He could have given it next week. He was basically living in a Fox News bubble about this, finally recognized that there was some level of panic and decided to give a speech without having any idea what he was going to say. And that is the worst fucking thing you can do. You give a speech when you have something to say. You don't say you're going to give a speech and then reverse engineer a bunch of policies so you have something to say. And when you do that and you're already bad at your job and have staffed the government with the dregs of the Fox News green room, this is what we end up with. And more people will be sick because of this.
And
More people are going to lose their retirement and their economic well-being and their jobs because of this, because the president opened his mouth without thinking.
And we should say, too, it's not just, even the policies corrected and clarified are not even close to the scope of what's necessary to address this crisis. I mean, he's talking about a ban from Europe for 30 days. He accepted the United Kingdom for reasons we don't know, even though the United Kingdom has more cases of coronavirus than any of the other European countries outside of Italy, or any of the countries that are part of the ban. So also, it doesn't address the fact that we probably have more cases in this country, and he never addressed testing. The biggest crisis we have right now is that we do not have available testing that's ready and available for everyone who needs a test. On Friday, Trump told us when he was at the CDC, everyone who needs a test can get one. That is 100% false. It was false at the time. It remains false today. There was Senator Lankford, a Republican senator, said that after a briefing today, we're 2 weeks away from safe, reliable, fast testing for everybody. 2 weeks away. This has been spreading through the United States of America for weeks. People cannot get a test if they need one unless they say that they were traveling to one of the infected countries in many places. There are not enough. It boggles my mind every morning I wake up and we still don't have available testing, and people in the government, people in charge cannot tell us why.
I mean, it's this. This is the nightmare scenario, right? Trump has been operating in a situation where all of the crises he faced were ones of his own making, and they were political in nature. And this is a true governmental crisis, a true crisis that would test even the most well-functioning and well-staffed government. And he is 100% not up to the job.
I don't know. I mean, do you think he has any grasp of how serious this crisis is, or does he know and not care, not know what to do? It's always tough to figure out what's going on in his fucking addled mind, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Same way. I think the fact that he gave the speech last night recognizes at least that he is beginning to understand the political crisis he faces, not necessarily the public health crisis that the country and the world faces. And ultimately, like everything else, it is Trump first, America last. And so he is thinking about ways in which he can help himself, not ways in which he can help solve the problems for the country, regardless of whether it helps or hurts him politically. And the policies that he offered just bespeak a massive ignorance to what's happening in America. And it's not surprising because he has been watching Fox News, and Fox News would make you think that this is all an impeachment hoax, as Trish Reagan from Fox Business said the other day, or it's Democrats fanning the flames for political gain as opposed to an actual public health crisis. I mean, the NBA canceled its season last night.
Yeah.
This is a very real thing. As you said, the governor of California told us that the governor of California recommended the cancellation of every event over 250 people. This is a very real crisis, but his policies are about preventing infected people from coming to America, not trying to stop the spread of disease among Americans, which is what the true problem is, right? That is what's happening in California, in Seattle, and in New York. And that is because, ultimately, Donald Trump is a germophobic xenophobe. And that is the worst possible set of characteristics you could have to deal with a crisis like this. He looks at this and sees it as an immigration problem, not a public health problem in the United States, because he's unwilling to admit the crisis because I think he thinks it's bad for him.
Here, trying to ask constructive questions here. What What do you think we would be doing differently if Obama was in charge right now and we were at the White House? Like, what would that have address looked like last night? How would it have differed tonally, substantively? I know you don't have all the policies, but what do you think?
Well, I'm not sure he would have given it last night.
Yeah.
Right. I think we would have waited until we had. Well, I think this would have gone one of two ways. He would have given the speech 2 weeks ago at the front end, or we would be waiting until we had very specific sets of things we could do. It would have certainly included a set of recommendations for what the Congress should do to help deal with the economic fallout and stop the spread of disease. Very similar, and I know we'll talk about this, very similar to what the Democrats in the House put forward today. I think it would have had very specific recommendations on how people prevent the spread of disease in their own families and communities around social distancing. I mean, we worked in the White House during a near pandemic during the H1N1 flu of 2009? 2009. And the amount of, I very much remember President Obama spent doing videos and PSAs in press telling people to do things as simple as sneeze into their elbow.
Yeah.
Right. And to do elbow bumps instead of shaking hands and fist bumps and all of those things, because we understood that we had a bully pulpit. We had a megaphone that we could communicate important information to people. And he used it for that. And that's what I think President Obama would have done last night. It would have been to try to very forthrightly describe the situation America was in, to give people usable, actionable advice on how to prevent the spread of disease in their homes and their communities, and it would be a recommendation of a list of things that that the country needed Congress to do to prevent the further spread of disease and help the economy recover. That's what I think we would have done, and we certainly would have not stated the policies wrong, and certainly would have been coordinating with the global community, because the thing we forgot to mention is that his administration did not tell Europe that he was going to institute a travel ban. So now they are furious at the United States. And this, I also think President Obama would be on the phone or in meetings or in video conferences with leaders of the world talking about coordinated global action to try to stop the spread of disease.
Yeah.
Donald Trump will not do that, cannot do that, because he is an isolationist who has no interest in a relationship with the other leaders in the world who would be being involved in collective action to stop it.
He reportedly doesn't even want to get in a room with Nancy Pelosi to negotiate an economic recovery package because he's still mad at her over impeachment. So he won't get in a room, let alone coordinate a global response with other world leaders. I also think Barack Obama would be on the phone every day with every medical expert and insurance industry CEO and drug company CEO, moving heaven and earth to get testing up and running faster. And look, if there were barriers to that, he would be telling the American people, here's where we are on testing. Here's why we still can't get ramped up yet. Here's the timeline. Here's what we're hoping for. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what I need help with Congress for to push this. We would know that the heart of this problem is that we're not testing fast enough, as other countries have started ramping up testing. Look, South Korea has fucking drive-through testing right now, okay? China had the number of new cases yesterday was in the tens because of all the measures that they instituted, many of which were dramatic. It is possible to mitigate the risk here and to stop the spread of this, or at least slow the spread of this, because we see other countries are doing it. And it's pretty enraging to look at other countries with drive-through testing talking about how they're slowing the spread of cases, and we're just not doing that here, and we don't even get an explanation from our leaders about why we're not doing that here. I believe the CDC director was in front of Congress yesterday, and he said the reason that we don't have drive-through testing is he didn't want to affect the relationship between patients and their providers, which, I tweeted about it and asked a bunch of doctors what that means, and no one thinks it makes any fucking sense. So I do think President Obama would be doing a lot to address the actual core problem here, but I also think the tone would be different too, right? And I do think it's very challenging to figure out what is the right tone on this, right? You do not want to spark panic, but you also don't want to downplay the severity of this. Jay Inslee is the governor of Washington, and they instituted a ban on gatherings with 250 people or more in Seattle, in the Seattle region, which is where one of the outbreaks is. And one of the reporters asked him at a press conference, is there a penalty? What's the penalty for holding a gathering of more than 250 people? And Jay Inslee said, the penalties are you might be killing your granddad if you don't do it. And a lot of people looked at that statement wow, but That's where we are right now. That's how serious this is. And you didn't hear anything like that level of seriousness from Donald Trump throughout this whole crisis.
No, it is a massive government-wide failure, and it starts at the top.
So now this moves to Congress, where Republicans have been told by Trump that they should pass a payroll tax cut that lasts until the election. The White House has also floated tax bailouts for airlines and cruise industry and the hotel industry. But the whole thing has so far fallen flat on Capitol Hill. Senate Republicans are reportedly worried that the tax cuts cost too much money, while Democrats correctly argue that a payroll tax won't help workers who are laid off because of coronavirus, and that it will be less impactful than more direct measures like paid medical leave, expanded unemployment insurance, food security, food assistance, free coronavirus testing that includes the uninsured, protections for healthcare workers, expanded Medicaid for poorer Americans who can't access healthcare. So, Dan, it looks like the House Democrats will pass a bill today with these measures called the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. The question is then what? House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy said this morning he's against the Democratic proposal. I believe the White House has called this radical left proposals, what I just talked about. Sick leave, food assistance for people. They're calling this radical socialist left proposals. So the Senate Republicans, House Republicans, and Donald Trump are now against this package. How much leverage do the Democrats have to make sure enough help gets to the right people?
I mean, they have a lot of leverage here, right? Like, there is no response bill can be passed without Nancy Pelosi's okay. And they should use that leverage. And I do think it's a balance between ensuring that we get something that actually matters, that will make a real impact in people's lives. And what the White House has talked about in terms of a broad-based payroll tax cut is in and of itself insufficient, because it does nothing for the people who are going to lose their jobs in this process. It's not going to help people get more access to testing. It's not going to help people who don't have insurance or are therefore unable to get checked out or get care or any of those things. But they have that leverage, and they should use it. And I think it's very smart of them to get that bill out there now and let that be the sort of the basis by which we have this conversation, because Trump doesn't have a plan. The Senate Republicans don't have a plan. Let this be the thing that they work off of. And so I think that they should push very aggressively. And I think it is just notable that let's flip this around. So let's imagine it is March of 2012 and the economy has just taken a massive hit in a similar situation. Could you imagine John Boehner and Paul Ryan and the Republicans putting forward a massive economic rescue package in Obama's election year?
No, I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's silly. Of course not. They'd be calling for tax cuts and getting rid of regulations is what they would have done.
And even if Obama supported everything they want to do, they would rather hurt the economy and Obama than help the country. And the Democrats are different that way. It's a fundamental difference between the two parties.
But there's always the question, so let's play this out. Democrats have this package. The Trump people say, no, we want a payroll tax cut, maybe a bailout for some of these industries. This is what we're going with. Nancy Pelosi says, no, we passed our bill. I'm not passing any kind of bill that doesn't include these specific measures that are going to help people affected by the virus and by the economic fallout. That is my priority. We gotta pass this, and I'm not going to pass anything that doesn't do that. Then Donald Trump and the Republicans say Democrats are obstructionist. Democrats are standing in the way. The radical left socialist Democrats are standing in the way and hurting Americans by standing in the way of progress and any kind of relief for people and blah blah blah. What happens then? What do you do if you're the Democrats?
Well, I think Democrats should be willing to negotiate on, this is obviously their starting offer, and there can be other things, like a payroll tax cut in and of itself, depending on how it's constructed and everything, it's not offensive. It's just not sufficient.
Enough. Yeah.
Right. And so, there is room for negotiation here, and certainly Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats understand that, which is why they pass this bill first. And if there is something that they can pass that that actually helps, and I think it's important that paid leave be a part of it. I think obviously free testing has to be a part of it. But if they can, they should be willing to negotiate. But if Donald Trump decides that he would rather just paint the Democrats as obstructionists than actually get something done, that would be cutting off his nose to spite his face. Because in a situation like this, the reality on the ground is much more impactful than any rhetoric from Trump. Right? Like, what do you think is going to hurt more politically? The fact that nothing is going to be done to help people and maybe stabilize the economy? Who's that going to affect? Donald Trump or
Right.
Nancy Pelosi? Or a bunch of tweets from Donald Trump? And so this is where the Democratic leverage lies, which is Donald Trump needs something to happen, and he can't get anything done without Nancy Pelosi. So he better get over himself and get in a room and figure it out, because otherwise he is going to be running for re-election as an impeached, unpopular president who lost by 3 million votes with an economy that is hurtling towards recession in the middle of a crisis.
Yeah, because people aren't going to sit there and say, where's my payroll tax cut holiday? They are going to be sitting there and saying, why can't I afford the treatment that I need right now? Why am I not getting paid when I'm forced home from work because of this coronavirus? Why are there not protections for the healthcare workers who are handling this? Why is there not available testing right now? That's what people are going to be saying when they're sitting home. And if they know that Donald Trump and the Republicans are standing in the way of that, that's not going to be too good for them.
No. I mean, that is where the leverage is, and I am just very glad to have Nancy Pelosi in charge right now.
Yeah, everyone should. This is like, imagine if we hadn't won the House in 2018 right now, what would be happening?
That's right.
So what's the right message from Democrats as a party? Sort of just like, let's broaden this out here, because that was legislative strategy. But how should, Joe Biden's giving a speech probably as we're recording this. I think it starts at 10 a.m. Pacific Coast time. Bernie Sanders is out there talking about this as well. And then we have the whole rest of the party. Everyone who goes on TV, everyone talks about this. What do you think the right message is at this point?
Well, I think we have to be leaders, and we have to use the platforms that we have to provide people with the important, actionable information that Donald Trump is not providing.
Yeah.
Right? Like that I think is what we expect to see from Joe Biden later today when he has his remarks. It's what we've seen from many members of Congress, from Democratic governors for sure. But I also think we have to be very clear about who is responsible for the failures in the system, and that is Donald Trump. And we should not back away from that because some people will scream unity, or you'll get etiquette lectures from, cable news pundits, et cetera. Like, people need to understand who is responsible for the failures here, and that is the Trump administration. And helping solve the problem comes first, but we don't have to pretend like politics is gone, because the Republicans in Trump are not going to put politics away.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to scream, don't be political, don't be partisan. Guess what? Donald Trump should not be in office right now. The people that Donald Trump has hired to work in the White House should not be in the White House right now during a crisis. So yes, I am doing absolutely everything possible to make sure that they are not in office, at least come November, because we are in the middle of an urgent public health crisis and potentially an economic crisis that's coming, and these people are not cut out for the job, and lives depend on it. So that's what I'm trying to do. Make sure they're not there anymore. So, in the sense, don't be political. Yes, I'm going to be political in that sense, because they are going to get people killed. And it's not even it is not an exaggeration, because you referenced this before, but Donald Trump and Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh and all the propagandists out there, they've already tried to downplay this crisis. They've already tried to downplay the public health aspect of it. Don't worry, it's going away. We have 15 cases. It's going down to 0. It's going to be fine. These are all things that they're saying. That is going to lead to more people refusing to do social distancing or other things, and that is going to keep this disease spreading at an unnecessary speed. That is what they are doing. So yes, I want to get them out of office, and I will be doing everything I can to do that.
I mean, the Fox News Trump just nexus of whitewashing this whole thing and trying to say don't worry is just so stupid, right? It's so dangerously stupid, because the Venn diagram of people most vulnerable to this disease and Fox News viewers are two perfectly overlapping circles. That is what we are talking about here. And the giving a potentially fatal disease to each other to own the libs is probably the ultimate manifestation of Trumpism in 2020.
It, it's not. I mean, it's not even funny. It's fucking sad. Um, so before we get to the primary, and leave this topic, let's talk about how coronavirus will affect the actual act of campaigning in 2020. Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders have canceled rallies this week. Trump still did his, but even Trump, after last night, the White House announced they were canceling his events in Colorado and Nevada this week. Dan, how does this change the campaign, and will Trump be able to hold off on doing his rallies for long?
The Trump part's a very interesting question because he talked about elderly people not gathering last night. That was like one thing he said that was somewhat useful. And
Yeah.
I would know that Donald Trump is an elderly person, primarily supported by elderly people. So having rallies seems to run counter to anything and everything you would do in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be a real test. In terms of like the nuts and bolts of the campaign, rallies provide a couple of things, right? They are an organizing opportunity for campaigns. It's where they get people to sign up to be volunteers, to register to vote. It's where they get people's data so that you can reach out to them for GOTV and volunteer recruitment later on. And every missed rally, is one, affects that, right? It affects your ability to build an organization. For the context of Joe Biden's campaign, like right now, it makes it, I don't think it's not a sort of a devastating blow that you can't have rallies in March for an election in November, but Trump is well ahead in data accumulation and volunteer recruitment, and so that matters. But ultimately, the other part of rallies that you and I care a lot about is their message opportunities, right? They're where you can drive news coverage and say things, and both and Biden is going to have to be Biden and Bernie will both have to be very creative about ways in which to get their message out without rallies. I do think in the context of the primary, it really freezes things. Like it's not totally evident. We're in this place where, and we'll talk about it, where the campaign is in a certain stage and now no one can do the sort of active campaigning that you would require to change the dynamics of the race. And so it's probably frozen in a place that is very favorable to Joe Biden.
Yeah, and look, a lot of this depends on how long this lasts and how long we're sort of locked down. And, if you read the advice from medical experts and people who are really studying this, we could be at the very beginning of this, partly because we've been so far behind on testing. But, this is sort of the period where, Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders are still sort of going at it. They're still primary. I wouldn't say there's a period of calm before the conventions because obviously, if Joe Biden wraps this thing up next week or in the coming weeks, he's already, as you mentioned, far behind Trump on organization and everything else, and so he's got to do a lot to catch up. But there's a difference between not having campaign rallies and not having a lot of active campaigning in the spring of 2020 than there is as we're getting into the summer of 2020 and the fall of 2020, right? Like if we're still here in September, that's a very different world and a very different campaign.